Amazing how dexterous these animals can be. I've seen elephants go down really steep slopes and they tend to adopt that posture. They'll put their front legs over the edge, go down on their back knees, and then just sort of slide down the banks, be it sand or earth. But lovely to see a little bit of engagement from these two young males having a little bit of a jostle. Catherine, you're feeling wild dogs for today. Well, that would be very special if it happens. I don't think in all the times that I've done live at the Waterhole, very rarely do we get to see a predator. A couple of weeks ago, we got a glimpse of some lions at, where was it? Was it at Cat-Eyed Pan? I think possibly. One of the um, cameras that we've got in the Greater Kruger National Park. We had some elephants which suddenly were sort of looking over in one direction and seemed to be slightly unhappy with something. And we panned the camera around just in time to see at least two lionesses being ushered back towards the tree line by a bull elephant who went to just go and chase them off. And that's the only time I've actually ever seen a predator on one of these. I know we do see them during the evenings. Those avid viewers will often see animals coming down, predators coming down after dark, but obviously doing this during the middle of the day, that is when most of the predators are being a little more secretive and lying up waiting for the cover of darkness. But wild dogs would be pretty spectacular. Okay, well, that was a lovely start at Tembe. I think we're going to head over to Juma to have a look at Juma Dam and the surrounds. Let's see what's happening over in the Greater Kruger. Oh, wow, that's pretty special. Well, no wild dogs yet, but that is unusual enough for me. That is an African harrier-hawk. Used to be known as a gymnogene. Some of you might know it as that. A really fascinating predator or bird of prey, well known for that facial marking. You can see that reddish pink color on that exposed skin around the face. Often is yellow, but in signs of stress or excitement can change color to that reddish tinge that we can see. Possibly because I wonder if he's been hunting and got a little bit excited. I know there are a few starlings and things that often nest in these dead trees around Juma Dam. And you can see those very long, scaly legs, which is very diagnostic of the African harrier-hawk. And if we were lucky enough to see him or her raiding a nest, you'll often see them sticking their legs deep into the holes, trying to pull out any poor, unsuspecting, defenseless chicks. You see them hanging upside down from trees and trying to reach into little cracks and crevices. Pretty amazing hunting adaptation. Looking particularly nice with that wind ruffling up his headdress there. Oh, that's a shame. But very, very, very special to see. Not often you get a nice one sitting in front of you there, and those facial markings are really impressive. And that change from yellow to that pink color happens very, very quickly. I have seen it happen in front of my eyes in a matter of maybe 10 seconds. It suddenly just goes this ruddy shade of pink. Very, very pretty. Well, that was an unexpected little delight. I wonder if you didn't find a bird's nest in there somewhere. I know the parrots are also around. Let's hope they didn't grab any parrots. But speaking of this strange, rather windy and overcast conditions for winter, let's go and have a look at the official weather. Okay, well, we've zoomed right the way back south to through South Africa, back towards the east coast, back to Tembe. But that was very special to see an African harrier-hawk. Not a wild dog, Catherine, I'm afraid, but that's not a bad start. So maybe you have brought some good mojo today. This is one of my favourite views there here at Tenby. I said it the other day as well, but compositionally, it's just a lovely area. And that big tree, I can't see exactly what it is at the moment. I think it's probably a Bilderbein looking at it, a weeping Bilderbein, or one of the Scotia Brachypetalia. It's such a beautiful tree nestled there in the waterhole. Very, very iconic. Possibly a Jackleberry, but the general shape doesn't look right for a Jackleberry for me. I would go with the Bilderbein, but maybe we can have a close-up look at some point. But it looks like a very nice place to be. I'm not surprised all the elephants do come down so regularly to this area. I'm really hoping that that harrier-hawk comes back so we can have a better and um, longer look at them because they are one of my favorites. If you're ever going to try and identify the harrier-hawk, things to look out for are the very large, broad wings, not particularly long, but very, very broad, and that gives him or her very good maneuverability. Any animals that have sort of got to negotiate through woodland, looking for opportunities for hunting, like he does, you'll find they have very broad wings because it just enables them to maneuver better in tight spaces. The most classic example of that would be the African crowned eagle, which is a truly magnificent bird if you've ever been lucky enough to see one. And their specialized diet is monkeys. They actually take monkeys out of trees. They can crush a monkey's skull with those talons, about 2 inch long claws. Terrifying, I would think, for a monkey. Um, but that's a big bird, stands over a meter tall, or pretty much a meter tall, yet has relatively short, stocky wings, but very, very broad to allow it to flit in and out of the branches looking for unsuspecting primate prey. Not one that you see very often, but very, very special when you do. Massive, imposing bird. And then the other distinctive feature, of course, of the harrier hawk is its tail. It has quite a long tail, but it's black in color and has this beautiful white bar running across it. And that's often all you're going to see if it's flying overhead. If you're looking up into the sky, it's sometimes more of a silhouette, or you can only make out, very prominent features. So looking for that barring on the tail is also very, very important. And then that facial markings, or that skin around the face, as we say. But yeah, hopefully that one will turn up again. For now, we'll enjoy the antics of these pachyderms at Tembe. So nice to see a big group of them, and nice to see a little bit of jostling between the young males a little bit earlier, just establishing social hierarchies, learning the behavior of an elephant. Learning to be a male elephant is a long and arduous process, takes many, many years. So mating opportunities for these big bulls generally not until they're probably 30 years of age or more. Catherine, you were saying that you've seen a juvenile African harrier hawk picking animals out of the tree. Certainly quite possible. Juveniles, as with all birds of prey, a little bit uniquely shaped face. It's similar to a honey buzzard as well. That's a bit of a weird one. But when you see it, it's just got an unusual shaped face. If you look at birds a lot, it almost has like a pigeony type face, the honey buzzard. And you get to notice these little discrepancies between them when you spend a lot of time looking for these birds. Donna Marie, you're welcoming me back. Thank you very much. As I said, it's an absolute delight to be back, feeling very much at home again. And Catherine, yes, you never know. We might still find some wild dogs. So I'm optimistic now after our rather nice harrier-hawk sighting. Asbo, you're saying that on Medico at the 12th of October last year you saw wild dogs. Well, if that was the last time they were seen, that's what, 10 months ago or so, 9 months ago. So possibly we are due a sighting. That was up in Medikwe. Of course, Medikwe well known for its dogs. I was lucky enough to see uh, quite a few, well, have quite a few wild dog sightings while I was up there doing some work for Safari Live, WildEarth. I don't even know how long ago it was now. 2 years, 18 months. Everything's a bit of a blur after my recent travels. But yeah, I can't wait to get back into the thick of it again. And that's always the excitement, not knowing what you might find. You can drive around the corner and find 25 dogs trotting down the road towards you. Very, very special. That does indeed look like a weeping bourbon from what I can see. That big tree on the right looks like it's got what we call parapinnately compound leaves. So those sort of split leaves with little leaflets on, whereas where one leaf is that whole sort of feathery structure. And the easiest way to identify a single leaf is you need to find what's called the leaf bud or the axillary bud. So if you look at the point at which the leaf sprouts from the branch, you'll see a little bump there. That's sort of the growing point of a leaf. So if you're ever unsure as to what type of leaf structure you're looking at, look for that axillary bud, and anything beyond that is the leaf. So they may be made up of lots of little leaflets, but ultimately that's an evolutionary adaptation where the leaves have sort of split in order to maximize photosynthesis, but more importantly to try and reduce water loss. Out in Africa, you don't want a massive big leaf because it gets very, very hot. Those stomata on the other side, on the underside of the leaf, are where water is given off, and also the oxygen, and where carbon dioxide is taken into the leaf. And if you have too big a leaf surface in a dry area, then you will dehydrate. That's why you see most of the sort of dry, scrubby, arid landscape. There's very small leafleted trees, those feather-like trees that we associate with the acacias and the wattles. Uh, Jenna, with regard to adult elephants making way for young elephants to drink before they had an opportunity, in my experience, I would say absolutely yes. Of course, you never know. Individuals have different personalities, but elephants are well known for their communal spirit and those close family bonds, and youngsters are given very, very high regard within them, and they are looked after, they are protected. So I think as long as it's safe, because they're very wary around waterholes of for young elephants of potential predation or slipping into the water if it's a steep bank, then in theory, yes. What you do find sometimes, if the elephants are really struggling for water, maybe they'll dig their own water. They might go to a dry riverbed and they'll use their feet and they'll dig down into the sand, just like if you're on the beach and you dig a hole and then it starts to slowly fill with water. Not only is that a natural filtration device, but it's the best way to get freshest water. And you'll often see that in the winter months if you wander down a dry riverbed. Be careful doing that if you are going to walk down there because it's an animal highway. You never know what you might find down there, an old male buffalo or a leopard or a lioness with cubs or something. So be very careful of those dry riverbeds. And what you'll often find is those holes are going to be near these little extrusions of dark rock, which is normally dolerite or a similar, what we call intrusive igneous rock, which is a rock that's cooled down underneath the crust of the earth. It's cooled down above the crust of the Earth. It's cooled down quickly, has fine grains, but it acts as sort of a block for any underground water, like an aquifer that will be running down that riverbed. We get a lot of these drainage lines that don't seem to have any water on the surface, but if you dig down, you'll find water. And these act like little dams, so underground water pools next to them. The elephants know this, potentially being able to smell it, and they will dig down to get to that water. You might find that the youngsters are unable to reach if it's particularly deep. Their trunks aren't long enough, or they haven't got control of their trunks. But they will certainly, the adults will take up the water and then pass it on to the youngsters as well in certain cases. But yeah, I do believe that the youngsters will be given preference, certainly. These two having a little shove. No aggression there whatsoever, just a little bit of youthful exuberance. One a little inyala coming down to the water on the near side, or a couple of female inyalas. 3. But I think we are going to head up north and east, and we're going to go and have a look at Oldonyo Waterhole up in Kenya. Beautiful grass and everything. Sounds that I'm looking forward to hearing is the sort of alarm call of a zebra, that noise that they make. It's something very characteristic to me of the African bush. And in fact, last night I was out playing with my telescope. I've got some new kit, which I'm looking forward to getting some hopefully more incredible photos of nebulae and galaxies and things that will hopefully be forthcoming. But I was out in one of the wildlife estates close to Hoedspruit, where I stay, and for the first time in a long time, whilst standing out in the darkness there, I got to hear the rasping call of a leopard, or a couple of leopards, or the same leopard doing a territorial march somewhere, I would think probably maybe 800 meters away, perhaps. So that was very, very special. That gave me goosebumps. I heard a hyena whooping. I saw a spotted eagle owl on the way home. I've seen baboons and vervet monkeys, and every single one of them has brought a smile to my face. But yeah, very much looking forward to engaging some of the other senses, the sights, not only the sights, but the sounds and the smells of the African bush. But that whooping call of a zebra has always been one of my favorites. Greetings, Joy in Hong Kong. Nice to hear from you as well. Thanks for sending in all of your comments and your questions thus far. Please do keep them coming. Now, speaking of vocalizations, actually, since we've got the giraffe there, a common question we're often asked is whether giraffes can make sound. A lot of people think they are mute. They don't normally make sounds, but they are capable under signs of extreme stress. If they were being attacked by a pride of lions, then they can make some noises, certainly. It's not something I personally have ever heard, but it is well documented that they have the ability to make sound, but prefer not to most of the time. Come in for a drink. But what I found particularly fascinating recently, and one of the benefits of me finally getting back here, is that my entire library of books, because I like a proper physical book. I don't like reading things on the internet or on a computer. It's such a less personal experience. I've got access to all of my books again, and a whole load of fascinating information that I've either not remembered reading before or have forgotten. And I was doing some reading on the family of blue butterflies, the Lycaenids, which are very common around here. There are potentially hundreds of different species, but they have a really interesting relationship with ants, which I'm sure we'll discuss in detail at some point, where they will subdue ants, and potentially the caterpillars will actually feed on the ants' eggs and the ants' larvae, and they subdue them with these pheromones that they give off, and the ants even actually protect them and feed them in some cases. But what I didn't realize is that some of these species of caterpillar are also capable of creating a sound. Now, obviously, they don't have a voice box like we do. They produce sound in a way similar to other insects by that stridulation, by rubbing body parts together. It's like a file system, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's some of their segments that they rub together, but some recent research has shown that these caterpillars can actually make a noise which might subdue the ants, but the frequency at which they produce the sound is very, very similar, apparently, to the drumming alarm calls that ants make. And then you might have seen this with termites. If you go to a termite nest which is active and you can see all the termites there, if you get too close or if they feel threatened, you'll see them sort of drumming on the floor, and then all the soldiers will flock to the opening. All the workers will disappear inside for safety, and you can see them drumming the floor. It's quite funny to watch. They move so quickly, it's all a bit of a blur. But ants do the same thing. And yeah, it's been shown that these caterpillars can produce a drumming sound that they think sends vibrations through the substrate to mimic the alarm call of an ant or a warning call, and that brings ants to the area to defend against any potential danger. So how cool is that? A caterpillar living in an ant's nest can actually summon the soldier ants to come to its aid in times of stress. Isn't nature amazing? Deborah Bota, the soil around this pan, is it dark because of the nearby volcanic activity? I've never been to that area, and I'm not going to lie, geology has never been one of my strong points. Uh, Even when I was training, I found it such a difficult topic to find more information on. I think of many of the disciplines that we as guides have to know, geology is one of them that really needs better access to a level of information which is understandable to the layperson. In my experience, you either get very, very basic or technically seriously advanced, and we really do need something in the middle. So, whether it's dark because of that, whether it's dark because of other nutrients that are in the soil, I'm sorry, I don't know the geology very well of that area, never having visited it. But generally speaking, the colour of the soil will certainly give you an indication of its fertility and what minerals are contained within it. I see somebody's sent me a link for a site on the BBC about lemurs and some noises that they make. So at some point I'll have a quick skim read of that and let you know what I find, if I've got any thoughts on it. Oh, I think it was from Luanda. Thank you, Luanda. I will certainly have a look at that. So there were some interesting things published recently about elephants. We discussed it last week, a bit about how elephants have specific calls that they use for individuals. They've done various experiments up in Kenya and shown that an individual can be called by another individual or will react to that specific message, whereas the rest of the members of the herd are fairly indifferent, and that they have the ability to speak to each other or address in the slightest, but very, very cool that we've been able to figure that out and to start to understand those complex social relationships. I suppose you're asking about those blue butterflies we were talking about. Are there butterflies in Africa that do lay their eggs in ants' nests? I don't know about actually laying the eggs in the nest. What often happens is the larvae will hatch off a larval plant and then make their way into an ant's nest for food and protection. But there may well be. It's such a diverse family. I think like nearly half of all the butterfly species found in southern Africa belong to that family of blues. They're very, very small, they're very, very difficult to distinguish, and there are very specific regional variations of them in terms of identification and where you can find them. Some of them restricted to literally like a few square kilometers or a few hectares that have only ever been discovered somewhere in the world. But many of them do indeed have some sort of relationship with ants. I can't give you a specific figure, but I think it's something like 75% of blue butterflies have some form of relationship, either with ants or with scale insects, where they are protected by, or they feed on, or live amongst. Of course, there are many other things that live in ant colonies. Things that have a relationship with ants are known as myrmecophiles. It's a good word for everybody this morning or this afternoon. Or myrmecophiles, I would spell it, but it's quite long. It has multiple syllables, and pronunciation's never been one of my strong points. And Kimberly, you were asking whether those were oxpeckers. Yes, they were oxpeckers that were by the water while the giraffe were drinking. Sorry, I kind of ignored the giraffes, going off on a bit of a tangent on butterflies, but that's all part of the fun. So yeah, those little oxpeckers, you can see them occasionally flitting on and off this giraffe, hopping around up on the neck and around to the head, feeding on the ticks. We get the red-billed and we get the yellow-billed. Most likely these are red-billed oxpeckers eating the pepper ticks, the sort of larval stage before the ticks become adults. Very, very small, but just as irritating, I can assure you, if they get on you and nibble on your flesh. And those oxpeckers are actually feeding, they want the blood within the ticks, not the ticks themselves. So they only fed on ticks that have already fed, basically. The yellow-billed oxpeckers, as the name suggests, have a sort of a yellow and red coloured bill, much heavier, and they specialise in feeding on the adult ticks, the much larger ones. Julie B saying it was nice to see the giraffe having access to the water without issues. I agree, this is quite a busy waterhole, this. Often say lots of elephants there, lots of herds of zebras, and giraffe are so sort of skittish and nervous about coming down to drink that the slightest disturbance causes them to have to reset that rather uncoordinated position that they need to adopt. Okay, well, it seems that little flurry of activity has ended at Oldonia, so let's go back to Tembe and enjoy our elephants. Or not, as the case may be. Ah, there we go. I've just had a quick skim of that article I mentioned that Rwanda sent me about lemurs and how lemurs may have demonstrated the origin of what we would consider to be music, which is rather interesting. Seems that they have a particular rhythm and beat almost when they sing to each other when they lose sight of each other. Also to advertise their presence to family groups and things. And it seems that yeah, they have a very steady beat, and apparently the Indus lemur this is referring to has the highest number of vocal rhythms shared with the human musical repertoire, even more so than songbirds and other mammals. So they could possibly be the evolutionary roots of musical rhythm. How cool is that? To think that our love of music may have stemmed from monkeys. And if you can hear some sort of ambient pitter-pattering, believe it or not, in late June in Huthbreit it is currently raining, which is highly frustrating because I was supposed to be doing stargazing evening tonight on one of the local reserves, but it's looking a little bit bleak. The bane of my life. Weather conditions, unfortunately. Joanne, I also don't know how those animals tolerate the oxpeckers. They must be very frustrating, but I think like anything, you learn to live with them, and I suppose they are performing a role or could often be seen as a beneficial role. We've had many debates, of course, about whether it's parasitic or commensalist or mutualistic, those oxpecker and mammal relations, but yeah, it must be very annoying. Elephants, of course, do not tolerate oxpeckers. They won't allow them on their skin, and they will much easily, or it is much easier for an elephant to swat away a pesky oxpecker with a trunk, and you'll never see an oxpecker on an elephant. It's like a little bit of excess testosterone in Tembe this morning. Seen quite a few males having little interactions. You can see the submissive behavior of the one on the left as this older elephant is coming on the right. You can see much more bulky, and you can see very much being given space. There again, a lovely little greeting ritual there, some mutual respect. Lovely embrace with the trunk. beautiful scenes, and it's so much fun trying to figure out what's going on in the minds of these animals. As we said before, no aggression. This is all just tactile communication, basically. But interesting to see the different approaches and the strategies, the body language. It's playful. It's certainly not aggressive, but very, very important. This is going to pick on the slightly smaller elephant now. So we might give him a little nudge with his tusk there. Very rare that you actually see two big elephant bulls going at it, hammer and tong. I think I've maybe only ever seen it once. And word of advice, if it does happen, make sure you give yourself plenty of space because they move quickly and they have little disregard for the surrounding area. Trees get flattened, uh, and it's not somewhere you want to find yourself if you're stuck in a car. If it doesn't start or you haven't given yourself an escape route, just be very mindful of elephants having a proper altercation because not only that, but the testosterone levels are up, and you'll find even after the event, potentially that I don't want to call it rage, but that red mist is still there. And if they see a vehicle, it's not impossible for some of that emotion to be transferred to us, particularly, well, from the winner because he's feeling confident, or from the loser because he's going to try and redeem himself. So always give battling elephants plenty of space. Puma con colour. Yes, I will certainly be watching out for the impending nova, as you've mentioned there. I actually did an article on it for the local Hoedspruit newspaper the other day. So, for those of you who don't know what a nova is, we're going to delve into some astronomy briefly. So, um, there is a star, or there will be a star, hopefully visible sometime before September, that will become visible in the night sky in an area where currently there is no star visible, even on a dark night. It's in the area close to a beautiful constellation called the Corona Borealis, which is the northern crown. It's a lovely little arc of stars in the northern sky from the southern hemisphere, definitely visible in the northern hemisphere as well. And so what a nova is there's two stars, what we call a binary star system, with one big old red giant star and then a white dwarf, which is the core of a star that has died and just all its atmosphere has disappeared and it's just left behind this scalding hot core of a former star. And those two stars are doing a dance around one another. They're locked in orbit. And because the other star, the red giant, is losing gas as it gets older, it's having outgassing events, and sometimes that gas can end up being attracted to the white dwarf, and that builds up on the white dwarf surface. And if it gets to a certain amount in terms of mass, there's basically a little thermonuclear explosion. Most of us know that if you heat hydrogen too much or detonate hydrogen, it can have fairly dire consequences. And every now and again, the amount of hydrogen gained by the white dwarf is enough, and you get this little release of energy. You basically have an explosion in space. It's not enough to destroy the white dwarf, it just sort of evaporates all of that gas. And then the process starts again, and you get what are called recurrent nova, which is the one that we are discussing. And it happens pretty much like clockwork. Every astronomers have been monitoring this star, and certainly from the activity that it's showing, you can monitor it with obviously with proper research grade equipment. It's invisible to the naked eye, but it looks like it's going again in the next couple of months. If it does, you're not going to see a blinding flash in the sky or anything like that, but say you will see a star become visible that wouldn't normally be there, and it'll be for a couple of weeks probably, and it's going to get as bright as what we call magnitude 2, which is similar to some other brightish stars in the night sky. So about the same brightness as the North Star, and I think something like sort of Spica in Virgo. one of the brightest stars in Sagittarius. So it should be very, very obvious. So any of you who know the sky and the stars, if you look up and see something very much out of place, close to that northern crown, then you might see that nova. And believe it or not, in 400 billion stars in our galaxy, we only know of about 20 recurring nova. So it really is a once in a lifetime opportunity to view. So, yeah, certainly something I shall be looking out for. This little impala tiptoeing around these gargantuan creatures. As I said, don't want to get too close to them. Donna Marie, that's a beautiful sentence you've sent in. It's always amazing how Mother Nature and Father Time fit everything into a unique relationship and balance in this wild earth. Nice use of wild earth, by the way. But Jeff, very well said. It is incredible how it all works together, from ants and caterpillars to elephants. Everything is unique. Everything does what it needs to do in the way that it should be done. And then you have us, but that's a story for another time. And that's why I particularly love the insect world, just because of the little intricacies, how things make sounds, the breeding behaviors, the social nature of some insects, pollination. It's just utterly, utterly fascinating, and it's been happening for billions of years, and it's continuously evolving in front of our eyes. And it's important that we open our eyes enough to see it and appreciate it and learn from it and protect it. Jelly bee, absolutely agreed. There is a lot said about elephant trunks, and how that can show their behavior and the incredible musculature of it and how it is used for so many different things. But you're quite right, their tail is also very interesting. Um, Amazingly muscular thing as well, but a very good indicator of behavior and body language, as you mentioned. So again, another thing to look out for: if you see an elephant with its tail cocked, sort of sticking out from its body, that's normally the sign of a stressed elephant. You'll often see it if they're fleeing from something or uncomfortable. They'll have their head held high, looking intimidating, getting a good lay of the land. But you'll also see that tail sticking almost out parallel level with the spine. Another good piece of body language to be aware of. Well, it looks like our testosterone levels have dropped a little bit, and everybody's going to quench their thirst, rehydrate after that little bit of exertion. Catherine, I'm glad you enjoyed that little astronomy side note. When you get to know me, you'll find there's quite a few of those. I just find the whole thing fascinating, and yeah, I'm developing a real love of astrophotography. So I was out last night, um, not taking proper photographs, more sort of testing some new equipment that I bought, a new equatorial mount that moves across the sky whilst using my tablet or my laptop to control it, and taking some long exposures of some different nebulae, so areas of dust and gas up there which are generally invisible to the naked eye. And it is absolutely incredible the level of detail that, you know, semi-professional, I suppose you'd call it, equipment can pick up. I've got a special filter that accentuates the gases of those nebulae. And I was just taking sort of 3 minute exposures. So you have to track the sky very, very accurately. And it is utterly mind blowing what's up there. And I'm very excited to use these nice long winter nights we've got now. Cool conditions, which is good. Less humidity in the air, less water vapor, less blockages for that light. And hopefully I'll be able to post some pretty amazing pictures in the coming months. But Catherine, yeah, the stars are fascinating. You mentioned, yeah, particularly in Africa, where we see so many more. Um, I suppose we might see a little bit more. The southern hemisphere is perhaps a little bit richer in terms of numbers, but there are plenty of stars to see in the northern hemisphere. I assume you are somewhere in the northern hemisphere. The difference is, of course, most places in the northern hemisphere have a lot more light pollution, so it's a bit harder to see some of those fainter stars. One of the other real benefits of the southern hemisphere is just because of the way the rotation and the orbit of the Earth works, we get to see the Milky Way directly above our heads, which is where about 99% of all of the stars in our galaxy actually reside. So we have access to a lot more. We've got the Magellanic Clouds, those satellite dwarf galaxies, and some incredible objects like Omega Centauri, a globular cluster, the Carina Nebula. There's even a nebula called the Cat's Paw Nebula that looks a little bit like a cat's paw, as the name suggests. But yeah, we're very, very lucky to see those things down here, and game reserves are a perfect place from which to stargaze. Not only is it dark because you're intrinsically away from population centers, but one of the things that I've always loved is the ambience of it. To be doing a stargazing evening and hear lions calling, or hyenas whooping, or elephants cracking branches in the background, or owls or zebras, whatever it may be, it makes for such an emotive and holistic, connective experience. Really very special. Catherine, you should definitely do some stargazing when you're back in South Africa. A night sky safari is well worth it. Um, you don't even need to have a telescope. The best part is all those cultural stories, the African stories, Egyptian, Greek, Mayan, Maori, Aboriginal. Um, I always consider the constellations are a great tapestry upon which people have noted their thoughts, their myths, their legends, their pasts, their futures, and listening to some of those cultural stories behind the stars are really special. And it's important to keep that culture alive. We live in such a technology centric world these days that we are losing those stories, and it's important to keep them in the mainstream. Child funny, yes, you have to look up that Nova date. Well, there is no obvious date, but it's anticipated to happen sometime before the end of September. Of course, we never know for sure. The galaxy works very, very slowly, but all signs and history suggest that will be the case, and it should be fairly evident. So have a look on a star app or something and have a look for that Northern Crown, Corona Borealis, and you'll do a quick Google and you'll be able to find exactly where you need to keep an eye out for. Okay, I think we're going to head back up to Oldonio, see what's happening up at the water there. Oh, what a beautiful scene. Strangely few astronomical stories about elephants, though, in my research, although it has been very difficult to find information on African star lore because it's never really been written down. There are some stories that the Great Square of Pegasus has been seen as an elephant by cultures or some African tribes. It's a bit surprising to me that there aren't more elephant-based stories up in the sky, considering it's the way it's revered for its power and everything else. Because if anybody is interested in learning more about the astronomy side of things, I've almost feel a bit guilty mentioning it, but I do run an astrotourism company as well as still doing WildEarth work and freelance guiding and freelance training. So Celestial Events SA, and that's what I'm actually out doing this evening. I've got a big group of people, and I'll be heading out there with the laser pointer and the photographic telescope, taking photographs of some of these amazing objects and projecting them onto a screen so large groups of people can enjoy them. So particularly now that we're in winter, that forms a lot of what I do this time of year because the conditions should be good. Although the bane of my life, clouds, look as if they might scupper this evening, but it's tonight and tomorrow night, so I'm sure we'll make up for it. Astronomy, do a lot of guest-related evenings, astrophotography tuition, and even virtual stargazing. So with the equipment I've got, I can project those images and do it across the airwaves to anywhere in the world. So you can see southern hemisphere objects from the northern hemisphere live on your computer screen. Chile being the Milky Way and the Southern Cross. We'll say the Milky Way is truly spectacular here. When I was out in New Zealand, under what we call basically Bortle 1 skies, total absence of light pollution. If you go to the eastern side of the Kruger National Park, um, very, very dark skies there, up into the Kalahari, down into the Karoo. There are lots of areas here in South Africa where you can really see the Milky Way pop and those dark dust lanes silhouetted against the myriad of stars behind them. Very, very special experience. And yes, the Southern Cross, probably the most famous of all the constellations in the Southern Hemisphere. Very, very obvious diamond shape in the night sky that's been hugely important for navigation. We don't have a south star like you have a north star in the northern hemisphere, and we use the Southern Cross to help us find what we call celestial south. It's a skill that we learn as guides, and when you're bumbling around in the darkness, did you see there, Ellie? It's helped me, having a bit of celestial navigation knowledge has helped me get out of some rather difficult situations if you've been off-roading following an animal and you've lost your bearings. Just being able to pick a bearing out of the sky and following it can be very, very helpful. Jelly Bee, I was asked this question the other day as well. I don't know why we don't see very many breeding herds and youngsters in this particular area. It's generally these big, beautiful bulls that come to this waterhole. I'm sure breeding herds do come through, but there'll be seasonal movement based on the availability of food. So possibly it's just the time of year, but I don't view the Aldonio cam enough to be able to state that we've just been unlucky. But there are, say, regional migrations or seasonal migrations, if migration is the right word, probably not, but certainly seasonal movements. Um, we see it particularly, say, in the Kruger. If you go up in the summer, if you go to the north of Kruger, I spent 2 weeks up in the Makaleki concession, one to elephants in 2 weeks. But if you go up in the winter, because there are natural springs up there and the elephants know that, there are elephant herds absolutely everywhere. So it does depend on what's available at any given time. I think it's just been a suggestion in my ear as to is the one of the reasons that the breeding herds avoid this is because there are so many bulls in the area. Um, I wouldn't have thought so, because generally speaking, unless an elephant bull is in must, he's not behaviorally likely to sort of associate and harass the breeding herd. The matriarchs will discipline them quite quickly, but it's not impossible. The honest answer is I don't know. Um, it does really help if you spend a lot of time in a particular area. You do begin to learn the patterns and figure out some sort of method to the madness of it all. But it's a big difference if you can spend a prolonged period of time at any one place. See all the oxpeckers on this giraffe who's come in for a drink briefly. Too scary with the elephant there. Bill Myrtle Beach. Will those leaves in the background lose their leaves? Again, this is not my backyard, so I wouldn't have thought so particularly, um, because it's more tropical up there, closer to the equator. Um, most of the acacias here do keep some of their leaves far more dense and foliage rich in the summer months, which is our wet season, of course, down here. A lot of trees are deciduous and do lose their leaves, including some of the acacias, but generally speaking, you'll always find some. They may not look particularly nice, they're not particularly vibrant and green, they might have got a more yellowish color. But these acacias and similar thorny type trees that we can see behind will never be completely bare and skeletal in my experience. Leopard lover, yes. We're going back to astronomy again, but mentioning that James Webb, the big space telescope, recently discovered 80 new supernovae and important to understand the early universe and life of a star. Yep, certainly it is. We're learning new things. So much of what we know has only come out of the last 100 years of scientific research, and it's inevitable that our parameters will change as we discover new things with better optical equipment. See, the elephant was not too happy about these warthogs approaching. Look at the body language. Might see the tail cocked out, we mentioned earlier. So for those of you who are not sure what the difference is between a supernova and a nova that we were talking about earlier, so a nova is a little brief flare up of a star that sort of semi-resurrects itself and then blows off all that outer shell again. A supernova is the catastrophic death of a star. It's when a star completely implodes on itself, massive thermonuclear explosion, and they are so bright and have so much energy that we can see supernovas occurring billions of light years away. And amazingly, we can extract information about that, and we can learn about what elements were present by analyzing that light that is given off. So it's incredible to think that things so far away still giving us signatures of their existence, of what they're made out of. And the very clever people in white coats who study these sorts of things are able to work out all those different um, classifications or categories of stars, their ages, how far away they must have been, what their evolutionary stage must have been for them to get to this point. And it is causing us to rethink how old we think the universe is, for example. We're finding evidence of structures and objects out there that are 13 or so billion light years away, i.e., we're looking at things just after or very soon after the beginning of the universe and finding more complex things than we thought should be around that early on. So we may yet have to recalibrate our ideas as to the size and the extent of the universe, but very interesting times that we live in. It's pretty much a case of little and large going on here. Okay, nice to see some warthogs, but we are going to head down to Founder's Lodge. We've not been there for a while. Oh, lovely. Some rowan antelope. Look at the colours there. Wow. Some seriously rich. Ah, sable. Sable and rowan, I always get the two confused. It's not things that I see very often. The females, I need to remind myself I haven't seen any of them for a little while. Definitely a sable bull, though. I thought I saw a rowan in the distance as well. I'm honestly not sure if they have both species there, but that's definitely a sable bull with that dark coloration. Just some horns disappearing behind the horizon. Magnificent creature, those scimitar-like horns. Can't get over the saturation of that orange soil though. Very Namibian-like. One of my favourite places in the world, particularly for stars as well. That orange sand contrasted with the blue skies is very, very impressive to see. A couple of Egyptian geese. Yeah, but it looks like our sables have disappeared. That's a shame. That would have been nice to spend some time with them. Very lovely dead tree for a starscape silhouette there. You guys have got me very much in an astro mood. We could be on the surface of Mars with that red coloration. Actually watched the movie The Martian again the other day. Brilliant movie if you haven't watched it. Oh, Catherine, I'm glad that was your first sable on the Live at the Waterhole show. We do see them from time to time down here at Founder's Lodge. But yeah, not the antelope you're going to see in the wild very often. Not many of them around, unfortunately, these days. And something, I mean, I've seen them in Swalu, up in the Kalahari. I've seen them out in Namibia. I think that I've had one, maybe two sightings of sable in Kruger National Park in nearly 20 years. Just not something you see very often. Not to say they're not there, and I don't know what the latest numbers are in terms of censuses. but very few in comparison to the other more common antelope. So good ones to look out for would be the rowan antelope, the sable antelope, and the tesserae as well. I saw some tesserae up in the north of Kruger last year, and I think there's only a few hundred in the entire park. So I was quite lucky to see those. One of the fastest antelopes, interestingly, the tesserae as well. Possibly the fastest, although some will argue that that might go to the blessed one. Sanjivroy, yeah, Eastern Cape Game Reserves are very, very beautiful and often quite green, I agree. Slightly more rainfall on the eastern side of the country. But don't be fooled, it can get quite cold down there and often very windy as well in the Eastern Cape. Actually hoping to head down to that side of the country in the next couple of months. I've got some work lined up, hopefully down there in August. That's not an area that I've been to for many, many years. So I shall have my binoculars trained to my eyes at all times. At night time, they'll be looking upwards. And during the day, they'll be trying to find some more bird species for my list. I just hope I can recognise anything, to be honest. It's been a while. I'm very much out of practice. But hopefully I will find something in addition to some Egyptian geese. That's the male we can hear vocalizing. The male has a much more of a sort of a hissy sound, and then the female, the more characteristic quack or honk, really, for a goose. Not that it's a goose, it's a shell duck, really, but the name is misleading. It could have been a female just doing a muted call. Difficult to tell unless they give it the full beans. Okay, but shame our sables didn't reappear, but let's head up to Zimbabwe and to Victoria Falls. A little bit more thing. Field stork, or certainly a stork of some description there in the background. Ah, hello, Warty. What have we got there? A Jacana. And we get two species of Jacana down in southern Africa. We get the African Jacana, and then we also get the lesser Jacana, which doesn't really occur in South Africa. You'd be very, very fortunate to see it. Where have I seen a lesser Jacana? I think it was in the south of Tanzania that I saw my lesser Jacana. But definitely not as brightly coloured. The African Jacana, much more sort of rufusy feathers that it has, and that lovely blue sort of casque and beak is a giveaway. And of course, they've got those absolutely enormous toes. That's why they're often known to walk on water. Their Those toads split their body weight or spread out their body weight so much they can walk across those lily pads. And then their name is Jacana. The lesser Jacana would certainly occur up there. It's interesting, I'd say it's almost a mixture of the two. The orange suggests that it is likely to be an African, but I don't see any of the blue coloration on the head. But say the light is not wonderful, and then it becomes a bit more complicated with juveniles. But the lesser Jacana is a lot smaller as well. But again, without a sense of scale, it's hard to say. Of course, they are one of the few polyandrous species of birds. Only about 1% of the 10,000 worldwide bird species are polyandrous, which means a female will have multiple male mates as opposed to the other way around, or forming monogamous pairs. A female will mate with a male, deposit a clutch of eggs, and leave him to do all of the upkeep, all of the incubating, all of the looking after the chicks, and she moves on, finds another male, and repeats the process. So those males, well, the parental care for the chicks is entirely down to the males in African jacanas. There are a few others, greater painted snipes, some of the button quails, but it's a very rarely seen breeding strategy. But lovely to watch when you see the males looking after their youngsters. They'll often tuck them in under their wings, and we always describe it looks a little bit like chopsticks hanging out from under their wings, these little pencil legs sticking down. You can see those massive toes. Comical clown feet, really. Yeah, Holly, it is amazing that you say you see this paternal care in such few birds. I suppose the women are better at it than men. I think that's a tried and tested thing as a rule. Exceptions, of course, to every rule. But yeah, very rarely used strategy within the avian kingdom, certainly. So polyandrous, where females have multiple male mates. They've got polygyny or polygamy, which is, as the name suggests, poly many and gyne referring to women. So that would be something like the wider families that we see, where the males will display and try and attract females to them and have the opportunity to mate with as many females as possible. And then, so the majority of birds form those pair bonds. Sometimes they're just seasonal, and sometimes they last for life. Siv in Norway. Did I see Halley's Comet in 86, 87? You were lucky enough to see it in the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. Well, that must have been very, very special. Um, if I did Siv in Norway, I don't remember seeing it. I don't want to give away my age, but suffice to say that I was still in single figures at that time and probably not too knowledgeable about the night sky. It vague recollection that I might have sort of remember hearing about it at least, but I don't remember ever viewing it, certainly, which is a shame. And I have to wait, or we all have to wait another 76 years for it to come back. Um, which I'm trying to think when it is due back, 2060 something, I think. It's about as far away as it can be from us at the moment, unfortunately, so we've got a long time to wait. But you never know with comets. Most of them are random, and we generally don't know that they're coming until we see them, because often they've either never been seen before and we don't know their orbits, or it's a new one, something out in the Kuiper belt or the Oort cloud, which are like asteroid belts outside of the orbit of Neptune. Maybe two of those bump into each other, or there's a gravitational interaction somewhere and one gets flung towards the inner solar system. So, the majority of comets we only see when we see them. always worth keeping an eye out, and great photo opportunities if they come close enough to us. Oh, hello, Kudu. I was about to say what was spooking the impalas. Look at this beautiful Kudu bull. Look at those horns. Magnificent. Such a regal antelope. Probably my favourite antelope. Well, I said that about waterbuck the other day, and I don't know what my favourite antelope is, but they are really spectacular and lovely to see out in the open. Hopefully, we'll see a few more. I've noticed up here at Vic Falls, they're often in little bachelor groups, but those horns are almost perfect. Beautiful symmetry in them, nice wide spread. A lot of the horns on kudus, or a lot of the kudu horns that we see down here in the Kruger area are a little bit narrower. They don't splay out quite so far, just regional differences because we have more heavily vegetated areas. And you'll find a lot of them have quite narrow horns. Whether that's also an evolutionary adaptation due to hunting pressure, of course, that's another possibility. Those with beautiful wide spreading horns are often, excuse the pun, but targeted for hunting expeditions from a trophy perspective. So possibly a little bit like with the elephants developing shorter tusks because they weren't persecuted. Maybe we're seeing the same in kudu horns. Who knows? Some guinea fowl. Very helmeted guinea fowl. Hudson, they're the only antelope I think you can relatively accurately age an antelope by looking at the spirals on the horns. There are thoughts of being able to count the rings on things like Sable and Impala, but I don't believe it's quite as accurate. And even then, you always have to be careful. Horns get broken. Animals will grow more quickly if they have access to the right minerals and nutrients. So, as a generalized rule, yeah, sort of half a twist for 1 year in kudus. That's generally what we work on. But the most accurate way to age an antelope, like with horses and elephants for that matter, is to look at the teeth. Have a good look at the wear and tear on the teeth. Chili bee, yes. Also hoping for the black heron. Always do when we come to Vic Falls Safari Lodge. Love watching their hunting strategy with their Batman-esque cape. Always entertaining. So lovely to spend some time with the ubiquitous impala. So often dismissed because of its commonality, but still one of the most beautiful creatures that we have here. So if we could get closer in on that male impala, we'd see the ridges on the horns. As I said, there are suggestions that you can age them, but I honestly don't know how accurate that is. For me, those ridges are more there from a territorial perspective and for dominance and fighting, enabling them to lock horns and then twist their necks slightly. Those ridges on the horns, those sort of concentric rings, lock together, and that allows the animals to push against one another as a test of strength, as opposed to trying to stab each other with those horns. Otherwise, without it, the horns would slide past one another and they just keep headbutting each other. Always a grey heron. Oh, bye-bye, Impala. And hello, Heron. But bye-bye, Vic Falls. Let's go back up to El Donio Waterhole. Well, looks like we did have some zebras. They may have finished. And this poor giraffe considering a drink, perhaps. Does he want to share the waterhole with an elephant? Or she, by the look of it. But let's find out. Oh, thank you, Siv, for conferring. Yep, Halley's Comet next visible 2061. So we have quite a while to wait yet. It's, as I say, often in space, once in a lifetime opportunities to view for many of us. Lucas also saying that this is your favourite camera up at El Dolnio Lodge. It certainly does seem to bring about an awful lot of activity during the day. Many elephants, zebras, giraffe, warthogs. And so what a beautiful bull who's just entered from the right as well. See the one on the left there is giving him a little bit of space. Again, a little bit of mutual respect. Respecting the size. And this giraffe really thinking, oh, I should have come in earlier. I will be surprised if this giraffe does decide to come and have a drink. So they are so skittish around the waterhole that I would have thought that it's going to be a little bit perturbed by these two bulls having a drink. Well, she's considering it. You go, girl. Julian made a video of an elephant tusking a giraffe at this waterhole, I imagine. That's pretty spectacular to see. I will have to go and have a little look and see if I can find it. So I'm aware of rhinos that have been killed by elephants. I've never heard of one taking out his frustrations on a giraffe. Thinking about it. Go on. Oh, good for you. Well, I stand corrected. Apparently she has the confidence. Maybe she feels safe in the fact that there are two elephants having a drink here. Ginny, why do elephants sometimes kill other animals? Well, it's a good question. There is no obvious reason. Obviously, two elephants themselves could kill each other in some form of dispute, usually over females, if two bulls are in must. But why they kill other animals, we just don't know. But very rarely, well, I suppose we do know to some extent. It's generally either females protecting their young if they consider something to be a great threat, or it's male elephants that are usually young male elephants as well that are must. There's reproductive state, elevated levels of testosterone, and they haven't quite got the experience yet to control it. A little bit like angry teenagers, basically, and they don't know their own strengths, and they can sometimes get aggressive. But there is no obvious rhyme nor reason for it, unfortunately. It doesn't happen very often. So yeah, I shall be very interested to go and have a look at this video of the elephant and the giraffe. Maybe these giraffes have heard the stories. But yeah, not something that happens very often, certainly. Tina, indeed, it's tea time at Old Donio. Yeah, maybe they do all have a schedule and say, it's coming up to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I better go and meet Fred at the local watering hole, just like we might meet up down the pub. Who knows? But it is sad when you hear about animals killing other animals if we find no obvious reason for it, but just makes you wonder what the animals must think of us. Huh? These males abandoned the other one at the waterhole. This one's got is quite plucky. This giraffe, with that other elephant getting closer. I'm very surprised that this giraffe is still quite happy having a drink. Bit of a standoff. You must see this sort of disdain in this elephant thinking, really? You're not moving out of my way? Okay, that's oh. Elephant taking ownership of the waterhole. Yeah, looks like a young male giraffe, that one, so possibly hasn't learnt the hard way yet. Hasn't learnt a sufficient amount of respect, but say very few things that will stand in the face of an angry elephant. Bill Myrtle Beach, you're saying you saw that happen live. Back to our elephant giraffe interaction. That must have been pretty amazing, and also saying it was unprovoked. I shall definitely have to have a look. I'm intrigued. But I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't a young bull or youngish. Oh, thanks to the incredible thing that is social media, I have just managed to track down that clip and just had a look at it, and it wasn't a young bull. It looked like a very mature bull. So very unusual. Difficult to see whether or not he was in must, because it was somewhat silhouetted. But say elephants can get a little bit territorial over their water sources. I'm sure the elephant didn't necessarily mean to cause GBH to the poor giraffe. It might have just been an overzealous interaction, but just goes to show you must always respect these animals. Their power, particularly of elephants, is almost unbelievable at times. Miss M was just saying a brave giraffe, another brave giraffe having a drink, certainly. Yeah, definitely getting a bit of a stare down, particularly from this one on the right. Head held high, ears out. Generally speaking, so mutual understanding, but say elephants can get quite funny around waterholes. You often see them chasing other animals away. They don't like sharing. Male taking the opportunity to do a quick bit of urinary analysis. Well, it's 3 on 3 now. He's turning into a bit of a Mexican standoff. Oh. Just a gentle nudge. Yeah, definitely a bit of a stare down going on here. Almost sort of think the elephant's thinking, really? Fair play, giraffe. I shall ruminate and look at you over my shoulder like I don't care. Hudson, why is the elephant lifting its trunk up like that? Well, generally speaking, you see that when they are, if they're not scratching behind their ears or tossing mud or dust onto themselves, it's normally just to get a better smell. So I imagine that's all it was. Possibly sort of out of curiosity as to the boldness of these giraffes, but it's generally speaking a curiosity thing to pick up better scents higher up in the air. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a behavioral thing. If it was sort of thrashing its trunk around or flicking its trunk towards the giraffe to sort of shoo it away, I could believe. But yeah, that was more of an investigatory thing. You also get a little bit of sort of displacement behavior sometimes. If an elephant is uncomfortable with the situation, it will often exhibit some forms of behavior because it's not quite sure what to do. It's sort of the same way that we might fiddle with something if we were a bit uncomfortable or unsure. Like I say, that's sort of quite unusual in my book for giraffe to come down and drink so close to 3 elephants like this. And I said there's no reason that they shouldn't, but generally giraffe are quite skittish, and the elephants probably know this, and it was, I like to think, a little bit unusual. Might have confused the elephant slightly. But you often see it on a walk. If you're walking and you're trailing some elephants and suddenly the wind changes, you'll see all those elephants will stop and those trunks will go up like periscopes. because they've caught wind of a particular scent on the air. What we saw could have been completely innocent as well. Maybe there's another elephant somewhere in the distance and he just got a whiff of a pheromone or some scent that he wanted more information on. On the peak of Kilimanjaro. Normally sort of November for a few months beyond that, but I've never been there myself, so I can't say I've seen it, but being as tall as it is, the air temperatures up there are cool enough to warrant snow and to keep the snow there for a little while. And I was just saying that don't underestimate the temperatures in winter. If you come to Africa in the winter months, be prepared that it's going to be cooler than you think. And I have no real explanation for it, but it honestly just feels colder over here than it does in the northern hemisphere at the same temperature. And I remembered that or discovered that again last night when I was out doing my astrophotography and playing with my toys last night. I had a t-shirt on, I had a fleece on, and I was borderline shivering. That didn't surprise me because it's winter here, but when I got into the car to go, the car thermometer said it was 16 degrees outside. I've just spent a few months in England where 16 degrees is considered a nice warm sunny day. Um, and I've been outside in single figures and not been particularly cold in the evenings. So why it feels so much colder in Africa, I don't know. Over here, a warm day of 30 degrees is nothing. A warm day in England at 30 degrees, you're dying. It feels about 45 degrees over there. So I don't know if it's a psychological thing or if other people feel the same thing. But yeah, teens over here in terms of degrees Celsius feels an awful lot colder than it does in the northern hemisphere in my experience. Sorry, that's my weather rant out of the way. Anyway, short story is the next couple of nights that I'm out, I will be having beanies and probably a pair of gloves on standby and a good thick jacket. It was lovely to see those two bulls almost touching foreheads just now. Huge flock of birds also coming down for a drink, possibly the what I believe to be wattled starlings, but we'd have to have a little bit of a closer look to be sure. And again, my Kenyan bird knowledge is not quite as good as it is in southern Africa, but they certainly look starling sized and rather upright posture that we'd associate with them. Now they're all going to fly away. Yep, and then there were none. Ah, look at those beautiful toenails on this elephant, freshly pedicured. That's one going for a wade into the middle. Normally they cluster around what I assume is the pipe on the far side. This one just wants to get his feet wet. Chili bee elephants, they do seem chilled most of the time, but they can be unpredictable. I agree to, well, I have to agree, but I think, well, there's a famous phrase that knocks around out here saying the most predictable thing about an animal is that it's unpredictable. I've always disliked that saying because I believe people are far more unpredictable than animals, and generally speaking, an animal will always give you an indication of its behavior if you know how to read the right signs. But yes, anything can suddenly change its mind at the last minute, and you must always be wary. It's one of the many rules of guiding or viewing animals, particularly in a vehicle or on foot. Make sure that you and the animal have got an escape route. That should things turn sour, you can get out there very quickly. We do get nonchalant, and I myself have done it many times. We allow these animals to get incredibly close to us, which is an unbelievable experience. But you also just need to be wary, and more than anything else, you need to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. A lot of the time, you don't know what it is, but I've had many experiences with elephants where I've just been spending time with an elephant or close by to an elephant, and I've just felt uncomfortable. Something hasn't seemed right. The elephant's not given any indication that it's unhappy or that it's liable to turn, but it's happened time and time again where I've made a decision to leave and I've heard somebody else has had an issue with that same animal. Um, it's just something I think maybe intrinsically we pick up on when we spend a lot of time around these animals, and almost that sort of classic sixth sense. Bill Myrtle Beach, you reckon today's supposed to be 41 degrees Celsius? That is pretty warm. My sympathies. I've no idea where you are, Bill Myrtle Beach. I assume somewhere close to Myrtle Beach, wherever that may be. But yeah, 41 degrees Celsius is pretty hot. That's the sort of temperatures we expect up here in the Kruger region in our summer months. But that's why I love winter, because it's cool. I can put more clothes on if I get too hot. I can snuggle up under a duvet. And generally speaking, although today seems to be an exception, it's generally clear, cool skies, which is perfect for what I like to do. So I look forward to winter. I don't actually mind the heat. I spent time out in Namibia in the summer where it's also 40 plus. It's still very, very hot, but that dry heat is somehow easier to deal with. It's the humidity out here that I've always struggled with. 80–90% humidity coupled with 40-degree plus heat is really quite unpleasant. And people say you sort of get climatized to it and you get used to it, and I'm sure I probably handle it better than some other people, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. Rather sedate at the waterhole, though. The elephant's not really achieving very much. This one literally has just decided to stand in the middle and play with the water a little bit. But I suppose why not? So we have a few comments with regard to the little weather conversation. Tim K, you're saying your American southeast has a similar savanna climate. Frost on the dawn and then 24 degrees by 11 o'clock. That sounds about right, yeah. Particularly if you go into the high-felt area of Africa, into Johannesburg. I've seen snow in Johannesburg a couple of times. Frost on the windscreen and then t-shirt and short weather by 10, 11 o'clock. Also mentioning the humidity. But yeah, it is quite hard to get used to. Some people like the sun, some people like to be hot. I've got friends who say they can't reach proper operational temperature until it's about 40 degrees outside. They need it. But I'm not one of those. Maybe it's because I grew up in the cooler climate that I've always struggled to adapt. My skin also doesn't like the sun. I'm still whiter than a polar bear in a snowstorm. And it seems even after 20 years of African sunshine, I have failed miserably to develop any sort of tan, but I do shy away from the sun when I can. Catherine, you're also saying you like the summer temperatures on a safari, and the cold in an open safari vehicle can be pretty unpleasant in winter. I don't disagree with you there, but say my justification is always the same. You can wrap up in blankets, put loads more layers on, and you can keep yourself warm. But if you're too hot, you're too hot. There's only so much you can do. But I do agree with you. When it's really cold, you're not enjoying everything because you're just thinking about how cold you are. So it swings and roundabouts. It really is. But yeah, those early morning safaris in sort of June, July, this time of year, can be pretty bracing, that's for sure. As Jordan suggests, there's always hot chocolate and amarula as well. These elephants really have taken up a monopoly here. There's four zebras now thinking about coming down, but there is quite literally an elephant in the waterhole. Although this one looks as it might be time to move on. The zebra has thought better of it for now. Good place as any to have an ear scratch. But we're almost out of time now, only a minute or so to go. So thanks everybody for all of your questions and comments. I hope you've enjoyed some of the sights and sounds. Dark Main Lover saying it's always a treat to watch ellies living in their own natural habitat. I could not agree with you more. We've been blessed with plenty of elephants today, and lovely to see that kudu up at Vic Falls, and a fleeting glimpse, if nothing else, of a sable down at Founders Lodge. But of course, once we're finished here, don't forget you can catch up with the guys for their sunset safari, find out about some of their plans, look at some of the clips over the last few days, and then they'll be going live shortly as well from Juma and from Amakala, hopefully bringing you some more incredible sightings. And so, please do wish me some clear skies for this evening. Forecast doesn't look wonderful, but I do see some patches of blue, so I'm crossing my fingers. But thanks everybody for joining us again. I will see you tomorrow again at 12:30 Central African time. We'll do it all over again. But wherever you are, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the wildlife, and I will chat to you all very, very soon.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the tent. Welcome to a rainy, overcast, and rather miserable day here in Juma Private Game Reserve. But that's okay. We're undercovers. We're dry. We've got some coffee. Panda's over there on camera. My name is Steve, over here in the chair. And, well, yes, you guessed it. This is on safari. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back. Welcome here to a lovely afternoon here where we're going to try and show you some highlights from the last 24 hours, although this morning was a little bit of a washout. So we did have a bit of a highlight of spending some time in the tent, did some honey badger videos and all sorts of other wonderful videos, and Cedric spent some time in the rain with hippos. It wasn't the best game drive out there, but anyway, we do what we can. Now don't forget everybody, this is a live and interactive game drive experience. Your questions and your comments are so valuable to us, so please do send it through using the hashtag WildEarth or throw them in on the YouTube chat stream. So it is a highlight show. Yesterday afternoon, Panda and myself, well, what can I say? We had the most, well, yesterday morning, we had the most remarkable morning with elephants. But yesterday afternoon was pretty special as well. We are conserving that myriad of species underneath the umbrella that you wouldn't even know about. That particular little mite that is now underneath that baby elephant sleeping. You wouldn't even think about that mite. Or the tick that is on that buffalo that Cedric has bottom. You wouldn't think about that tick. Or the oxpecker, both of those species. All those other birds following. All the grasses that they're eating. The trees that they're feeding on now. All are encompassed underneath one umbrella of conservation of the African elephant. So that is essentially why they're called umbrella species. They need all the habitats that we find here in the Kruger. There's not a single habitat in the Kruger that you don't find elephants in. Always getting up. Mum's gonna come disciplined now. Play nicely with your brother. Oh, Mama. Play nicely with your little one there. So there's not a single habitat in the Kruger that does not encompass elephants. What a strange sound that was, Panda. We were quite surprised. We saw the little baby just having a little nap, just sleeping sweetly. Panda, are you an older brother? Younger brother? You have an older brother, eh? So Panda knows, eh? Panda knows all about it like I do. You know, the older brother's there. He was the best, the number one for so long. And then along came this other thing. This other thing that it got all of Mum's attention. And right there in that moment, you know, I've been talking a lot about human sort of how do we relate to elephants. And right there in that moment, Mum wasn't looking. And the baby tried to get up. And the big one, he just pushed him. And the baby made a noise. Mom's like, what's going on over here? It wasn't me. Connie, that was a very incredibly sweet baby. I thought that was very, very cute indeed. A funny noise, isn't it? Now, we talk about elephant vocalizations, everybody, and that... What? If you didn't see that happening, you wouldn't think that that was an elephant making that noise, would you? But that baby got up, and it was sheepish, and the other one was a little bit like, wasn't me, Mom. I think my brother used to do that to me all the time, actually. I love you, Greg, but you did. You're an absolute terror when I was growing up. Dark May Love, a good afternoon to you as well. And the glamorous Camop Panda. Panda, the glitz, the glamour. Indeed. So everybody, yesterday afternoon, it's very hard to capture everything that we saw yesterday into a short little clip. But we spent hours with elephants feeding yesterday, enjoying the bark off of the trees, and the mothers teaching the youngsters how to feed, and quite a lot of animal behavior, adults interacting with youngsters, adults interacting with each other, definitely showing that sort of dominance display between sort of a female who's a bit more dominant in the herd versus one that's not. And it just goes to show you how body language is so important. And we talk about it all the time when we are basically looking at elephants, looking at animals. Just watch what it's doing. One elephant was busy feeding like this, and the other elephant came and was walking. And the eyes and the body language, everything said to the other elephant, this elephant wants what I've got, and it moved away. And it's true. It is. It wants exactly what you want. Like if I wanted something from Panda, I walk up to him like this, and I grab it. He's going to know, and he's going to go, ooh, or he's going to give it. Either way, depending on our relationship, whether I beat him normally when I take things or whether I ask him nicely is going to depend on how he reacts to me there. If he beats me normally when I respond like that, then he's just going to stand strong and go, no, that's not for me. But if he normally succumbs, he's going to, what the elephant does is turns its back and goes, okay, you go. So that body language is so important, and there's so much of it in the animal world, so much of it in the human world all the time. 60, probably 80% of what we go through on a daily basis is body language. Check it out. Have a look around the room you're sitting in right now. Who's there? Give them a look and see what they feel about that look. Dark May Love, I thought that the Ellie sighting was adorable. It most certainly was. Very, very special to spend time with Ellies. Jordan, you're most welcome to send these questions through into my ear. I will hear them nicely, and then we can carry on. But it looks like we are going to move on to our second clip. If that is all of the elephant questions for now, I'm sure there are some coming. Please do send them through, everybody. Your questions do go a very long way, and when we do have a little break in a little while, I will get to all of them. So please, now's your time. Send them through. Jordan will copy and paste and put them on my screen with your name, of course, which you get read out live on TV. Okay, well, moving on to clip number 2.
You can see they're on the fire break at the moment. Not old males. You can say maybe around about 15, 16 years old. Maybe a little bit less, maybe between, so about 10 to 15 years old or so. Typical with males, always just testing one another out, hooking their horns together like that. Blicky, that is true. When you see a buffalo sparring, you always feel, they must watch your eyes. And that horn, the tip of their horn always just comes so close to their eye. It's amazing that I'm sure there's so many, or many a time there's an injury due to that. And even if it's a play fight, I think there's still moments where you feel that they have, they've taken it too far. There's your buffaloes running in the background. Well, look, he's going to these two boys. Let's see what happens. Oh, is he just going to walk past? He's making a funny noise. Huh. I'm going to go a little bit forward, Paul. Sorry, I just want to go a little bit forward. We can try and get all of them in here. Be a little bit prepped. Just want to see what we get here. I know it's going to be tough, but let's see. So we're on the boundary, on the eastern boundary, and apparently the Kambulas, those 4 male lions, and the female was inside Torchwood. So I wonder if they're not further east of these buffaloes. Maybe they chase them into Juma. Making a funny noise, eh?
See buffalo bulls doing that. I mean, at one point in that clip, I might have to disagree a little bit with Cedric there on the age of some of the boys. I know that definitely in a herd, you will get buffalo cows, definitely get up to 15, 16, 17. But the bulls come into their prime, in my experience, 8, 9, 8, 7, 8. That's when the bulls are right in their prime. And you look at them, some of those guys, they had very clean fur. As they start getting older, sort of 10, 11, you start getting the patches here, patches of skin missing. And that's when they start becoming retired bulls. They don't really get much older than that in the herd. All of that pushing and shoving. So they can stop becoming dominant from 6, but normally about 7, 8 become very, very dominant breeding bulls within the herd, and then huge amounts of pressure between them pushing each other around. And it's nice to see the sparring. And as Picky said, and as Cedric said as well, very, very concerning when they do get very physical with each other, because when they do, well, they forget about absolutely everything around them. Do you like buffalo, Panda? You like buffalo? Nice to see them on the fire break like that as well. You know, you get there. I don't know, they just stand out a bit more. We're seeing a lot of buffalo moving through the vegetated areas, and I don't know, they just maybe it was also the light, the afternoon yesterday. They just looked quite surreal out there in the open area, and there's nothing really that they're feeding on at the moment. So they were just having a moment in the fire break, as they do. So some questions coming through. Julie, this dusty sighting was almost like it was a show put on. Indeed. Well, that whole herd moved there onto the fire break, just a small patch created for that one event for yesterday afternoon. One and only, not going to happen again. Just for you guys last night. I thought the Ellie sighting was adorable. Dark Main Lover, you said that. I already read that. Mindy, does boss size directly correlate to dominance? I mean, Mindy, you don't really notice, I don't think you notice a huge difference in boss size, but definitely horn length and width. I suppose it does have a bit of a correlation, but, you know, the strength of the buffalo, the size of the buffalo is quite well correlated. And then the boss size and the horn size is normally quite well correlated. It's not often you're going to find big horns and then like a small boss. Normally when you find a big boss, they've generally got quite substantial horns, if not strong horns, but then they are